The courtroom air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and simmering tension. Nicholas Hale, a man whose name was synonymous with power, stared at the empty mahogany chair beside his lawyer. That chair was meant for his wife, Elena. His very pregnant wife. Instead, a void. Across the aisle, his mistress, Sophia Vance, offered a smirk so subtle it was almost invisible. But Nicholas saw it. The flash of cameras from the press gallery felt like a series of small explosions, each one illuminating his public humiliation. His wife was missing, his legacy was on the line, and the woman who sat in the pews like a patient vulture held a secret that was about to unravel his entire world. He was a billionaire who had everything. But in that moment, staring at an empty chair, he had never felt so bankrupt. The gavel fell with a sharp crack, a sound that seemed to split Nicholas Hale's world in two. On one side was the life he had meticulously built, a global empire, a penthouse overlooking the city, a reputation for ruthless success. On the other was the gaping emptiness of the chair where his wife, Elena, should have been sitting. "All rise!" The bailiff's voice boomed through the hushed courtroom. Nicholas rose, his movement stiff. He smoothed down his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, a futile gesture of control in a situation that was spiraling far beyond it. His lawyer, Robert Salinger, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with cynical disapproval, shot him a sideways glance. "Any word?" Robert whispered, his voice a low rasp. Nicholas shook his head, his jaw tight. "Nothing. Her phone goes straight to voicemail." Judge Marianne Thompson, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor and eyes that missed nothing, peered down from her bench. "Mr. Salinger, is your client present?" "Mrs. Hale is unexpectedly delayed, Your Honor," Robert said, his voice smooth as silk. From across the room, in the gallery packed with reporters, a camera flashed. Nicholas flinched. He could already see the headlines. "Billionaire's pregnant wife, a no-show at divorce hearing." He risked a glance towards the source of his immediate torment. Sophia Vance sat in the second row, a picture of quiet support, her hands folded demurely in her lap. But her eyes, when they met his, held a triumphant glint. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a gesture that said, "She's not coming." "You're all mine now." The judge was not amused. "Delayed? This is a preliminary hearing, Mr. Salinger. Punctuality is not optional." The memory of the last time he had seen Eleanor slammed into him. It was 2 nights ago, the air in their sterile, minimalist apartment crackling with unspoken resentments. He had come home late, as usual, smelling of the expensive perfume Sophia always wore. Eleanor was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her silhouette framed by the glittering city lights, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "We need to talk, Nick," she had said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm tired, Elena. Can this wait?" He had already started loosening his tie, his mind on a multi-billion-dollar merger he was about to close. "No, it can't." She turned to face him, and the look in her eyes was one of profound sadness. This baby deserves better than this. Better than a father who's a ghost in his own home and a mother who cries herself to sleep every night. The accusation stung, mostly because it was true. He had been a ghost. His ambition was a relentless beast, and it had consumed everything, including his marriage. He loved Elena. Or at least, he loved the idea of her. The beautiful, gentle woman who had once looked at him with adoration, not disappointment. But love required presence, and he had been absent for a long time. "I'm providing for this family, Elena. That's what a father does," he had retorted, his voice colder than he intended. "Providing? You think money is all that matters?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "You haven't asked me how I'm feeling, how the baby is doing in weeks. You're more intimate with your quarterly reports than you are with your own wife. The fight had escalated from there, a tornado of accusations and hurt feelings. It had ended with him sleeping in the guest room, the silence between them, a heavy, suffocating blanket. The next morning, she was gone. A simple note was left on the kitchen counter. I can't do this anymore. I need to protect our child. Mr. Hale? The judge's voice snapped him back to the present. He realized he had been staring into space, lost in the wreckage of his own making. Yes, Your Honor? We will grant a 1-hour recess, Judge Thompson said, her gaze stern. If Mrs. Hale is not here by then, I will be forced to issue a bench warrant. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor, Robert said, nudging Nicholas. As the judge left the bench, the courtroom erupted in a low hum of chatter. Nicholas felt a hand on his arm. It was Sophia. Don't worry, darling, she murmured, her voice a soothing balm that felt like poison. She's just being dramatic. She'll turn up. He looked at her perfectly composed face, her knowing smile, and for the first time, a sliver of doubt pierced through his arrogance. He had seen Elena's pain, her desperation. This wasn't drama. This was something else, something terrifying. As he walked out of the courtroom, hounded by reporters shouting questions, he felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. Elena was gone. And as he looked at Sophia's smirking face, he couldn't shake the feeling that she knew exactly why. The memory of the pregnancy announcement was seared into Nicholas's mind, a moment of jarring contrast against the backdrop of their decaying marriage. It had been 3 months prior, during a rare evening when he was actually home before midnight. He was in his study, poring over schematics for a new green energy initiative, when Eleanor appeared in the doorway. She was holding something in her hand, a small white stick. He barely glanced up, his focus still on the complex equations on his screen. Not now, Elena. I'm in the middle of something. This will only take a second, she said, her voice trembling slightly. She walked over to his desk and placed the pregnancy test in front of him. 2 pink lines stared up at him, stark and undeniable. Nicholas stared at it, his mind struggling to process the information. A baby? They had talked about it years ago, in the early, sun-drenched days of their relationship. But now, with their marriage hanging by a thread, with Sophia's scent clinging to his clothes most nights, are you sure? He asked, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate in his mouth. A flicker of hope sparked in Elena's eyes. Yes, I'm sure. I'm 10 weeks along. He should have stood up. He should have taken her in his arms, kissed her, shared in the monumental significance of the moment. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, a cold, calculating part of his brain already kicking into gear. The timing was terrible. The merger was at a critical stage. A baby would be a distraction, a complication. We'll need to make an appointment with Dr. Collins, he said, his tone more like a CEO scheduling a meeting than a man who had just found out he was going to be a father. We need to confirm everything. Make sure it's viable. The light in Eleanor's eyes died. Viable? Nick, this is our child, not a business venture. I know that, he said, a touch of irritation creeping into his voice. I just want to be practical. The conversation that followed was a disaster. He had been distant, clinical, his mind already calculating the financial implications, the impact on his schedule. He had suggested a paternity test, a move born not of genuine suspicion, but of a detached, lawyer-driven paranoia that had become his default setting. The look of utter devastation on her face was something he would never forget. You think this isn't yours? She had whispered, her hand instinctively going to her still flat stomach. Of course not, with the divorce proceedings, Salinger will insist, he had stammered, trying to backtrack. But the damage was done. He had taken a moment that should have been sacred and tainted it with suspicion and pragmatism. From that day on, the chasm between them had widened into a canyon. Elena had retreated into herself, her pregnancy a private journey he was not invited to share. She went to doctor's appointments alone. She started setting up a nursery in the spare room, a pastel-colored sanctuary of hope in a home filled with despair. He had watched from a distance, a stranger in his own life, caught between a wife he was systematically destroying and a mistress who offered an easy, passion-filled escape. Sophia had been ecstatic when he told her about the pregnancy, but her reaction was laced with a venom he had chosen to ignore. A baby? How quaint, she had purred, tracing a finger down his chest. Don't worry, darling. It just makes things simpler. A clean break. She'll be so busy with her little project, she won't have time to fight you over the settlement. He had let her words soothe him, had allowed himself to believe that this was for the best. He had convinced himself that Elena would be happier without him, that he was doing her a favor by leaving. He had thrown himself deeper into his work, into his affair, using them as a shield against the guilt that was eating away at him. Now, standing in the cold, sterile hallway of the courthouse, the memory of his own cruelty was a physical weight on his chest. He had been a fool, a blind, arrogant fool. He had pushed away the one person who had ever loved him for who he was, not what he was worth. His phone buzzed. It was Clara Jensen, Eleanor's best friend and a fiercely protective journalist. He ignored the call. He didn't have the strength to face her righteous fury. Robert Salinger appeared at his side, his face grim. I've called every hospital in a 50-mile radius. No Jane Does matching her description. I've got a private investigator on it. Marcus Thorne. He's the best. An investigator? Nicholas said, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. It's come to this? It came to this a long time ago, Nick, Robert said, his usual cynicism replaced by a rare moment of brutal honesty. You just refused to see it. The 1-hour recess was almost up. The empty chair in the courtroom was waiting, and Nicholas Hale, the man who could move markets with a single word, was utterly, terrifyingly powerless. The night Elena disappeared, the storm that had been brewing between them for months finally broke. Nicholas had come home to find a single, damning piece of evidence on the marble island in the kitchen. A credit card statement. His credit card statement. On it, circled in red ink, was a charge for a suite at the Four Seasons, the same hotel where he and Sophia had been meeting for months. Elena was sitting on the sofa, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly around a mug of tea. She didn't look up when he walked in. I thought you were in Dubai, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. The trip was postponed, he'd lied, his heart starting to hammer against his ribs. Was it? She said, finally looking at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but clear, as if she had cried all the tears she had left. Or was it just more convenient to tell me that, so you could spend the weekend with her? She pushed the statement across the coffee table. I'm not stupid, Nick. I've known for a while. I didn't want to believe it. I thought the baby would change things. I thought you would change. The confrontation he had been dreading for months was finally here, and he had no defense. The lies, the deceit, the casual cruelty of it all. It was laid bare under the harsh lights of their living room. Elena, I can explain, he started, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. Explain what? She shot back, her voice rising. Explain how you could lie to my face day after day. How you could come home from her bed and get into mine. How you could stand there and talk about paternity tests for our child while you were sleeping with another woman. She stood up, her body trembling with a mixture of rage and grief. "I gave you everything, Nick. I believed in you when you had nothing. I supported your dreams. I celebrated your successes. I stood by you through everything. And this is how you repay me? You humiliate me, you betray me, and you do it while I'm carrying your child." The raw, unfiltered pain in her voice was like a physical blow. He saw not the quiet, accommodating woman he had taken for granted, but a fierce, wounded lioness protecting her cub. "Sophia, she's just," he stammered, trying to find the words to minimize the affair, to make it seem like a meaningless diversion. "Don't you dare say her name in this house," Elena hissed. "This was our home. You defiled it. You defiled us." She walked over to the bar, her movements jerky, and poured herself a glass of water, her hand shaking so much that some of it sloshed onto the counter. "I want you out, Nick. Tonight. Elena, be reasonable. Where am I going to go?" "I don't care," she screamed, the sound echoing in the cavernous apartment. "Go to her. Go to your hotel suite. Just get out of my sight." The fight raged on for another hour, a toxic whirlwind of recriminations and bitter truths. He had said things he could never take back, cruel, defensive words designed to wound, to shift the blame. He had called her naive, had accused her of trying to trap him with the baby. The look on her face when he said that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Finally, exhausted and defeated, he had packed a bag and left, slamming the door behind him. He went straight to the Four Seasons, straight to Sophia, seeking solace in the one place he knew he could find it. She had welcomed him with open arms, her body a warm and willing distraction from the guilt that was gnawing at his soul. The next morning, he had woken up to a string of missed calls from his lawyer. The divorce hearing. He had completely forgotten. He had rushed to the courthouse, his mind a fog of alcohol and regret, expecting to face Elena and her lawyer, to begin the ugly process of dismantling their life together. But she wasn't there. Now, as the recess ended and he was forced to walk back into the courtroom, the reality of the situation was crashing down on him. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a tactic. Elena was gone. Judge Thompson was already on the bench, her expression grim. "Mr. Salinger, your client?" Robert shook his head. "We have been unable to locate Mrs. Hale, Your Honor." A wave of murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge banged her gavel. "In light of Mrs. Hale's disappearance, and given that she is in a vulnerable condition, I am postponing this hearing indefinitely. I am also instructing the police to open a missing persons investigation with Mr. Hale's full and complete cooperation." Her eyes bored into Nicholas. "Is that clear, Mr. Hale?" "Yes, Your Honor," he croaked, his throat dry. As the court was adjourned, a swarm of reporters descended on him, shouting questions. "Mr. Hale, did you have a fight with your wife? Is it true you were having an affair? Do you know where she is?" He pushed through them, his security detail clearing a path. As he reached the exit, he saw Clara Jensen, Elena's friend. She was standing by the door, her arms crossed, her face a mask of cold fury. "You did this," she said, her voice low and venomous. "Whatever has happened to her, it's on you." He had no answer, because deep down, in the part of his soul he tried to keep hidden, he knew she was right. He had broken Eleanor's heart. And now, he might have broken her completely. The vanishing act was not a mystery. It was a consequence. His consequence. The days following Elena's disappearance blurred into a nightmarish haze. Nicholas's penthouse, once a symbol of his success, became a gilded cage. The police came and went, their questions polite but probing. Detective Marcus Thorne, the private investigator Robert had hired, was a quiet, observant man who seemed to see right through the carefully constructed walls Nicholas had built around himself. "Tell me about the last time you saw your wife, Mr. Hale," Thorne had asked, his voice calm and steady. Nicholas recounted the fight, editing out the most damning parts, painting it as a simple marital dispute. Thorne listened patiently, his expression unreadable. "And the note she left," Thorne continued, holding up a plastic-sheathed piece of paper. "I can't do this anymore. I need to protect our child." "What do you think she meant by that?" I don't know," Nicholas lied. "Maybe she was overwhelmed. The pregnancy, the divorce. Protect her child from what, Mr. Hale?" Thorne pressed, his gaze unwavering. "Or from whom?" While Nicholas was fending off questions, Sophia was masterfully spinning a narrative for the press. She was the picture of the devoted, heartbroken partner forced into the spotlight by tragic circumstances. She gave a tearful, exclusive interview to a major news network, her performance worthy of an Oscar. "Nick is devastated," she said, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. "He loves Elena. He would never do anything to hurt her. We were all hoping they could resolve their differences amicably." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Elena, she's been under a lot of emotional strain lately. She wasn't herself." The media ate it up. The headlines shifted from questioning Nicholas's role to painting Elena as an unstable, hysterical, pregnant woman who had run away in a fit of pique. Sophia, with the help of a PR team funded by Nicholas's own money, was systematically destroying Elena's reputation, recasting her as the villain in her own disappearance. Nicholas watched it all unfold with a growing sense of unease. He had given Sophia access to his life, his home, his resources, and she was using them to wage a war against a woman who wasn't even there to defend herself. Clara Jensen was the lone voice of dissent. She used her column to fight back, to remind the public of the Elena she knew, a kind, intelligent and strong woman who had been pushed to the brink by a cheating husband. "Do not be fooled by the crocodile tears of a mistress," Clara wrote. "Elena Hale is a victim, not a villain. And we should be asking the man she was married to some much harder questions." The article earned Clara a cease and desist letter from Robert Salinger, but it also planted a seed of doubt in the public consciousness. And more importantly, it planted a seed of doubt in Nicholas. He started noticing things. The way Sophia would subtly steer conversations away from Eleanor. The way she had so quickly and seamlessly inserted herself into his life, as if she had been planning it all along. The way she seemed to know things about his business, his schedule, his vulnerabilities, that he had never told her. One evening, unable to sleep, he found himself in the nursery Elena had been creating. It was the one room in the apartment that felt like her. Soft yellows and greens, a hand-painted mural of woodland creatures on the wall, a small rocking chair in the corner. He sat in the chair, the silence of the room amplifying the guilt that was consuming him. On a small bookshelf, tucked behind a copy of Goodnight Moon, he saw a small, leather-bound box. He didn't recognize it. He opened it. Inside were Elena's old journals, dating back to before they had even met. There were also bundles of letters, tied with faded ribbons. He hesitated. This was an invasion of her privacy, another betrayal. But the need to understand, to find some clue, some reason for her disappearance, was overwhelming. He picked up a journal from 10 years ago, the year before they met. He started to read, and as he read Elena's words, a different story began to emerge. A story that had nothing to do with him, and everything to do with a past he thought he had buried. He read about her family, her struggles, her dreams, and then he saw a name that made the blood run cold in his veins, a name from a chapter of his life he had tried desperately to forget. Isabel. He flipped through the pages, his hands shaking. He found a faded photograph tucked between 2 pages. It was a picture of a younger Eleanor, standing with another girl, both of them smiling, arms slung around each other's shoulders. The other girl was hauntingly familiar. It took him a moment to place her. It was Sophia. But her name, according to the inscription on the back of the photo, was not Sophia Vance. It was Isabel Vance. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. Vance. The same name as the family his father's company had destroyed in a hostile takeover 2 decades ago. A small, family-run business that had been bankrupted, its patriarch driven to ruin. Suddenly, the pieces started to click into place. The way Sophia had sought him out at a charity gala, the way she had so expertly dismantled his defenses, his marriage, the way she seemed to know all his weaknesses. This wasn't a random affair. This was a long, calculated game of revenge, and he had walked right into the trap. He wasn't the player, he was the pawn. The discovery of the photograph and the name, Isabel Vance, sent Nicholas into a tailspin. He spent the rest of the night devouring Elena's journals, piecing together a history he had never known. He learned that Elena and Isabel, the girl he knew as Sophia, had been childhood best friends, as close as sisters. They had grown up together in a small, tight-knit community, the kind of place Nicholas had only ever seen in movies. He read about the Vance family's business, a small but innovative tech company that had been their pride and joy. And he read about the day the Hale Corporation, his father's behemoth, had swept in and dismantled it, piece by piece, in a ruthless, hostile takeover. The journals described the aftermath in heartbreaking detail. Mr. Vance's subsequent depression and financial ruin, the family losing their home, the shame that had shattered their lives. Elena had written about Isabel's transformation, how the bright, laughing girl she had known had become consumed by a burning, all-encompassing desire for revenge. They had drifted apart in college, their paths diverging, their friendship a casualty of the chasm between the world of the haves and the have-nots. Nicholas felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He had known about the takeover, of course. It was one of his father's legendary victories, a story he told with relish at family dinners. But to him, it had always been an abstraction, a set of numbers on a balance sheet. He had never considered the human cost, the lives that had been upended in the name of profit. He now understood that his affair with Sophia, with Isabel, was no accident. She had hunted him down. She had studied him, learned his weaknesses, and then she had inserted herself into his life with the precision of a surgeon. The affair, the destruction of his marriage, the public humiliation, it was all part of her long-game revenge. She wasn't just trying to steal his heart, she was trying to burn his entire world to the ground, just as his family had done to hers. The realization was sickening. He had been a willing participant in his own destruction, blinded by arrogance and desire. He had betrayed Elena, not for a meaningless fling, but for a woman who was actively plotting his ruin. The next day, he called Marcus Thorne, the investigator. He didn't tell him everything, not yet. He needed proof. "I want you to dig into Sophia Vance's past," Nicholas said, his voice low and urgent. "Everything. Her real name, her family, where she grew up. I want to know who she really is." Thorne, ever the professional, didn't ask why. "I'm on it," he said. While Thorne was digging, Nicholas started to pull away from Sophia. He made excuses, cancelled their dinners, ignored her calls. She grew increasingly agitated, her carefully constructed facade of the supportive partner beginning to crack. "What's wrong, Nick?" she demanded, showing up unannounced at his office. "You're being distant." "I'm just stressed," he said, avoiding her gaze. "The investigation, the media, forget about all that," she said. her voice dropping to a seductive whisper as she tried to kiss him. He turned away. Her eyes narrowed. "What's going on? Is this about Elena? Are you having second thoughts?" "No," he said, his voice flat. "I just need some space." Her expression hardened. "Don't shut me out, Nick. After everything I've done for you." The veiled threat in her words was unmistakable. He was trapped. He knew her secret, but she knew his. The affair, the lies, the way he had treated Eleanor. She could destroy what was left of his reputation with a single phone call. A few days later, Thorne called him. "You were right to be suspicious," the investigator said. "Sophia Vance doesn't exist. Her real name is Isabel Vance. Her father was the CEO of Vance Technologies, the company your father's corporation acquired back in the early 2000s. The confirmation hit Nicholas like a physical blow, even though he had been expecting it. "There's more," Thorne said. "I've been tracking financial records. Over the past year, large sums of money have been moving from your offshore accounts into a series of shell corporations. All of them are linked back to a holding company controlled by Isabel Vance." Nicholas felt the floor drop out from under him. She wasn't just after revenge. She was after his money. She had been systematically draining his fortune, using the access he had so freely given her. He was a fool, a blind, arrogant, trusting fool. He had handed the keys to his kingdom to the one person who wanted to see it burn. The whispers from the past had become a roar, and they were all screaming the same thing. He had been played. The day the letter arrived, the city was shrouded in a cold, persistent drizzle, the sky the color of slate. Nicholas was in his office, staring blankly at a stock ticker that was charting the slow, steady decline of his company's value. The news of Elena's disappearance, coupled with the whispers of corporate malfeasance that Thorne's investigation had started to uncover, was taking its toll. The empire he had built was beginning to crumble. His assistant buzzed him. "A courier just dropped this off for you, Mr. Hale. It's marked urgent and personal." A plain manila envelope lay on his desk. There was no return address. His name was typed neatly on the front. His hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. He thought, for a wild, hopeful moment, that it might be from Eleanor. He tore it open. Inside was not a handwritten note, but a single sheet of paper, a formal letter from a law firm he didn't recognize. And tucked behind it was a small, folded piece of stationery. He read the formal letter first. It was a cease and desist order, but not from a rival corporation. It was on behalf of a former employee of his father's, a man who had been the lead accountant on the Vance Technologies acquisition. The letter alleged that Nicholas's father had not just acquired the company, but had done so using illegal and unethical means: insider trading, corporate espionage, and blackmail. It claimed the accountant had proof and that he was prepared to go to the SEC. Nicholas's blood ran cold. This was the final piece of the puzzle. Sophia, Isabel, hadn't just been seeking revenge for a legal, if ruthless, business deal. She was seeking justice for a crime. His eyes fell to the folded piece of stationery. It was from the accountant himself. The note was brief and to the point. "Mr. Hale, I know you are not your father, but you have benefited from his sins. Isabel Vance came to me a year ago. She has been paying me for information, for the proof I have kept hidden for 20 years. She is not the person you think she is. She is driven by a pain you cannot imagine. She plans to use this information to ruin you, to take everything from you, just as your father took everything from her family. I am an old man. I have no love for your family, but I do not wish to see more lives destroyed. The choice of what to do next is yours." The letter was a bombshell, shattering the last of his delusions. Sophia's plan was more intricate, more devastating than he had ever imagined. She wasn't just bleeding him dry financially. She was about to detonate a bomb that would obliterate his family's legacy, his company, and his entire life. He thought of the confrontation that was to come, the ugly, public battle that would ensue. Lawyers, accusations, the media frenzy. He would be exposed as a fool, an adulterer, and the heir to a criminal enterprise. And then he thought of Eleanor. He thought of her quiet strength, her unwavering moral compass. He thought of the disappointment in her eyes the last time he had seen her. He had become a man she could no longer recognize, a man he no longer recognized himself. He looked at the letter in his hand. He had a choice. He could fight, use his wealth and power to try and bury this, to destroy the old accountant and wage war against Sophia. He could become his father, a man who valued victory above all else, or he could do something else. He could tell the truth. The thought was terrifying, a leap into an abyss. It would mean losing everything, his company, his fortune, his status. It would mean public humiliation on a scale he could barely comprehend, but it would also mean freedom. Freedom from the lies, from the guilt, from the man he had become. He picked up his phone, his hand steady for the first time in weeks. He didn't call Robert Salinger. He didn't call his PR team. He called the one person he knew he could trust to help him tell the truth, no matter how ugly it was. "Clara," he said, when she picked up the phone. "It's Nicholas Hale. I need your help. I need to tell you everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. And then Clara Jensen's voice, cautious but curious, said, "I'm listening." The press conference was held in a stark, impersonal hotel ballroom, a far cry from the opulent settings Nicholas usually commanded. There was no Hale Corporation banner behind the podium, no team of slick executives flanking him. There was only Nicholas, dressed in a simple dark suit, and Clara Jensen, who stood to the side, her presence a silent endorsement of the bombshell that was about to drop. He had given her everything. The accountant's letter, Thorne's report on Sophia, the story of the Vance family, his affair, his neglect of Eleanor. He had held nothing back. Clara had listened, her journalistic skepticism slowly giving way to a grudging respect for what he was about to do. He stepped up to the podium, the glare of the camera lights blinding, the cacophony of reporters shouting questions a dull roar. He saw Sophia in the front row, a look of smug satisfaction on her face. She thought he had called this conference to deny the rumors, to fight back. She thought she was about to witness his final, desperate act. She had no idea he was about to hand her the victory she craved, but on his own terms. He cleared his throat, and a hush fell over the room. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady. "I am here today to set the record straight. Not just about the recent events concerning my wife, Eleanor, but about a history of deceit that has led us to this point." He saw Sophia's smile falter, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "For the past several months," Nicholas continued, his gaze sweeping over the room before landing on her, "I have been engaged in an affair with a woman you know as Sophia Vance." Gasps rippled through the room. Sophia went pale. "Her real name," Nicholas said, his voice ringing with clarity, "is Isabel Vance, and our relationship was not one of affection, but of a meticulously planned revenge." He laid it all out. The story of Vance Technologies, the crimes of his father, the way Isabel had orchestrated their meeting, the affair, the siphoning of his funds. He spared no one, least of all himself. "I was a fool," he said, the words tasting like ash. "I was arrogant, and I was unfaithful. I was so consumed by my own ambition that I failed to see the truth in front of me. And in my blindness, I deeply, irrevocably hurt the one person who ever mattered. My wife, Elena." He turned his attention fully to the cameras, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "Elena, if you are watching this, if you can hear me, I am so sorry. I am sorry for my betrayal, for my neglect, for the pain I have caused you and our unborn child. You were right to leave. You were right to protect yourself from the toxic world I had created." He took a deep breath. The Hale Corporation, as we know it, was built on a foundation of lies. I can no longer be a part of it. Effective immediately, I am resigning as CEO. I will be cooperating fully with the SEC investigation into the acquisition of Vance Technologies. I will liquidate my assets to ensure that the Vance family and any others harmed by my family's actions are compensated. He was systematically dismantling his own life, piece by piece, in front of a live, global audience. In the front row, Isabel Vance, Sophia, was staring at him, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. This was not the victory she had envisioned. He had stolen her thunder, co-opted her revenge, and turned it into an act of public penance. She had wanted to see him burn, but she had not expected him to light the match himself. "I don't know where my wife is," Nicholas concluded, his voice cracking. "But I hope that by telling the truth, by stripping away the lies and the power and the money, I can one day become a man worthy of being the father to her child. That is all." He stepped away from the podium, ignoring the storm of questions that erupted around him. He walked past Isabel, who looked at him with a mixture of hatred and something that looked strangely like defeat. He had lost his empire, but in doing so, he had taken back his soul. The confession was not an end. It was a beginning. The fallout from the confession was immediate and catastrophic. The Hale Corporation's stock plummeted, and the board of directors, in a desperate act of damage control, accepted his resignation without a moment's hesitation. The SEC launched a full-scale investigation, freezing his assets and seizing company records. The media, which had once fawned over him, now portrayed him as a tragic, fallen titan, a modern-day Icarus who had flown too close to the sun. Nicholas welcomed the fall. Each headline, each lost dollar, felt like a necessary flagellation, a stripping away of the artifice that had defined his life. He moved out of the penthouse and into a small, rented apartment, the kind of place he hadn't lived in since he was a struggling student. The silence was deafening at first, but gradually it became a comfort. For the first time in years, he had time to think, to reflect, to simply be. Isabel Vance, stripped of her grand, dramatic reveal, found herself in a legal quagmire of her own. The shell corporations and stolen funds were easily traced back to her, and she soon had her own set of federal investigators to deal with. Her revenge had been hollowed out, her victory turned to ash. Weeks turned into a month. Nicholas cooperated fully with the investigators, both the private one and the federal ones. He held nothing back. He felt a strange sense of lightness, of unburdening. He had lost everything he thought was important, only to find that it had all been a crushing weight on his soul. One afternoon, a package arrived at his new apartment. It was a simple cardboard box, addressed to him in a familiar, elegant handwriting. Elena's handwriting. His heart leapt into his throat. He carefully cut the tape and opened the box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a letter and a small silver picture frame. He picked up the letter, his hands trembling. "My dearest Nick, I saw your press conference. Clara sent me the link. I have to admit, I didn't think you had it in you. The man I saw at that podium, the man who was willing to lose everything for the sake of the truth, that was the man I fell in love with all those years ago. I'm sorry I disappeared without a word. I was scared. Not of you, but of the world you were living in. The lies, the secrets, the poison of Isabel's hatred. I couldn't bring a child into that. I had to get away, to find a place where we could be safe, where our baby could be born into peace, not chaos. I don't know what the future holds for us, Nick. The wounds are deep, and I don't know if they can ever fully heal. But what you did, it was a start. A powerful, brave start. You chose honesty over power, and in doing so, you gave me a glimmer of hope. Nicholas had to stop reading, his vision blurred by tears. He wiped them away and continued. I don't need your money. I don't need your empire. All I ever wanted was your heart, your presence. All our child will ever need is a father who is good and kind and true. Prove that you can be that man, Nick. Not for me, but for yourself. And for her. Be well. Yours, Elena. His hands shaking, he picked up the silver frame. He turned it over. It was a photograph of a beautiful, tiny baby, swaddled in a soft pink blanket, sleeping peacefully. The baby had his dark hair, and, even in sleep, a hint of Eleanor's gentle mouth. Tucked into the back of the frame was a small, folded note. On it, in Eleanor's script, were 4 simple words. Her name is Hope. The photograph became Nicholas's entire world. He placed it on the small table beside his bed, the first thing he saw in the morning and the last thing he saw at night. Hope. It was the perfect name. She was his hope, his reason, his North Star in the vast, empty sky of his new life. He had lost his empire, but he had found his soul. The man who had once commanded boardrooms and moved markets now found purpose in simple things. He started volunteering at a local community center, helping underprivileged kids with their homework. He started reading again, not financial reports, but novels, poetry, books that spoke of the human condition, of love and loss and redemption. He didn't try to find Elena. He knew she needed time, and he needed to earn the right to be in their lives. He respected her silence, her need for space. He sent a single letter back, via Clara, not asking for forgiveness or a second chance, but simply telling her that he would spend the rest of his life trying to be the man that she and Hope deserved. His life was quiet now, but it was real. The emptiness of his old life had been replaced by a sense of purpose that no amount of money could ever buy. He was no longer Nicholas Hale, the billionaire. He was just Nick, a man trying to be better, a father waiting for the day he could meet his daughter. The path to redemption was long, and he was only at the beginning. But as he looked at the photograph of his daughter, her face a perfect blend of him and the woman he still loved, he knew he was finally on the right track. He had lost the world, but he had gained a universe. He had found hope. We hope you were captivated by this story of ambition, betrayal, and the long road to redemption. If you were moved by Nicholas and Elena's journey, please show your support. Like this video, comment below with your thoughts on second chances, and share it with someone who loves a powerful story.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.